What's up, gamers? DreamcastGuy here, and this is my honest review for Shadow of the Erdtree. It has now been almost 2 years since Elden Ring initially came out and completely blew my mind. I'm a big From Software fan, and I got completely addicted to it. Playing hundreds of hours, I beat the game 10 separate times, doing strength builds and magic builds. I even got the platinum trophy, and so, of course, I've been eager to see what's in this massive piece of DLC. Now, that word is important. Massive. This is bigger than your standard expansion or some dinky little piece of downloadable content. Shadow of the Erdtree is a huge new map with almost as much content as the entire main game combined. But the question is this fun or is it frustrating? Does it feel overpriced and tacked on, or is it actually worth it? Right up front, yes, of course this is 10 out of 10 fantastic, but I do want to break down the goods and the bads. Thank you for watching this video. If you could, please give this video a like and subscribe if you haven't already. Let's see if we can get this to 2,000 likes. So as I write this script, I have now beaten the main new storyline. I've killed a bunch of bosses, I've explored the map, but there is a lot left to truly see everything possible in Shadow of the Erdtree. What immediately strikes you as you enter this fresh landscape called the Realm of Shadow is that we've been transported to the past. We're looking for this long-lost demigod called Miquella, and as I'm sure you can imagine, this is going to be a difficult task. But what really hits you as soon as you begin this is that the new zones, they're different from the lands between, mostly because of the verticality. Like, some of the stuff may seem tiny or like, oh, I just need to walk over there, when it's all an optical illusion. There is a crazy amount of depth. Dungeons stacked on top of dungeons, hidden bosses tucked inside of a high-up structure, or something like wonderful power-ups in some far-off swamp. I mean, when I first started this, I found a giant dragon with a huge samurai sword just tucked under him, and I grabbed it, and it completely changed the rest of my playthrough. Shadow of the Erdtree is the same level of quality and tight design of the original Elden Ring, but also it almost feels like a sequel. This does, in a way, feel like Elden Ring 2, but let me actually just start to dig into the different aspects of it. Very early on, you're going to meet these first cast of characters. There's a lot of NPCs that talk a lot about our mission and this time period and what's actually going on, and they give you a map. It's this little set of key locations that kind of point you vaguely in the direction as to what you need to be doing. Now, when you start to do this, as you first set out, you're going to notice the upgrade system very quickly. This is called Shadow Realm Blessings. This is definitely intended to be beaten after the main game. Or if you go to this area, I think you need to be at least like 150 or level 170 or something like that to actually be able to stand up a pretty good fight. You know, you got to have the health and the damage to even, take on a lot of these new bosses. So it seems like From Software games, they're always hard, but with this piece of DLC, it seems like they're trying to make sure that it doesn't become frustrating. Like, I enjoy the fun challenge of Elden Ring, but I have seen some journalists and stuff, some like professional gamer dudes, saying that this stuff is too hard. Essentially, you can now pick up these Shadow Realm Blessings, which are stuff like Scarred Tree Fragments. This gives you a stacking buff that increases the damage you deal and decreases the damage you take. It essentially makes it easier and easier. So this is optional. You don't have to do it. It's just something where I think that Part of the brilliance and the popularity of Elden Ring is that there are these extra choices to make stuff easier if you feel something is too difficult for you. It's possible to summon extra helpers or do online co-op or of course use spirit ashes and stuff like that. I think Shadow Realm blessings are just an extra way to have tools on hand to help you defend yourself. Now, next up, let's talk dungeons and let's talk about new encounters. So what they decided to do for Shadow of the Erdtree is that there is less dungeons overall. Instead of having like 5 major dungeons, there's like just a couple. There's a small handful, but each one is incredibly detailed. A lot of them have cool secrets. They've got extra little stuff tucked here and there. It's that old saying, all killer, no filler. I like that term a lot. I mean, there's stuff like floating palaces, cursed forts, poison swamps that have somehow become a weird castle, or just underground laboratories that are making some truly evil creations. And what I like about this is that something about the realm of Shadow, it has a different vibe, and it's something I love. There's this sense of living darkness that we didn't experience in Elden Ring, where as much as I love Elden Ring, a lot of times the story almost felt concluded. Everything is just so wrecked and destroyed and decayed by the time we show up. Whereas now we get all these different NPCs to talk to, quest lines to participate in, fresh pieces of lore, and actually getting a chance to see some of these great figures while they're still alive, still battling, still trying to live. So in this, there is 10 new bosses, there's multiple dungeons, and there is 100 new weapons. So a lot of these are like different styles of stuff you've seen before, but there are 8 completely new weapon types. Like there's a dual-wielded saber thing that's super freaking cool. You hold the swords backwards. There's like a short greatsword, so you could do heavy attacks faster than the game typically would allow. Or my personal favorite, I discovered this katana very early on that does bleed. It is very heavy, and it does a lot of stagger damage. I completely beat the DLC with this new weapon that is so good. I actually want to do like a new game plus where I get a chance to go back and play through the whole game again, because I want to play standard Elden Ring now with this bad boy. But let me talk about the different dungeons. So I don't want to spoil stuff. I'm trying to be as vague as possible, but I think that this has a super brilliant pacing to it. I think part of what is so incredibly addictive to doing multiple playthroughs of Elden Ring is the fact that you do have a lot of freedom. There is different directions to go, different dungeons to conquer, different forts that need to be burned down and stuff. And surprisingly, Shadow of the Erdtree, even though they do kind of direct you a bit more heavy-handed, it is wild how much they managed to have a crazy amount of variety. Huge ruins built out of what look like human fingers, underground bridge systems, or just trying to platform inside a library. Like, look at this game. I cannot get over the fact that this just has a sense of agility to it. It feels like this is a style of difficulty that we haven't seen in other From Software games, where it's tough, but it's also just so smart. I am so blown away by the level of quality, by the level of depth. I mean, this really does feel like Elden Ring 2. It practically feels like Shadow of the Erdtree is trying to multiply some of the best moments that you experienced in Elden Ring. Like the amount of times where you just open up a door to a completely new zone and your jaw is just dropping because you're overwhelmed by the terrifying beauty of some impossible new task. Like, I cannot just stop being amazed. Like, I have completely beaten this. I've finished every boss. I've found a ton of secrets. I've done a lot of upgrades, and I still feel like I've barely scratched the surface. There's still crazy amounts of areas I need to drop into or climb up to. There were so many times during my playthrough where I just had to stop and stare at stuff that just seemed not only impossible from like a reality perspective, but just even from a design standpoint, this stuff is so mind-bending, so illustrious, so gigantic. I mean, I feel like a lot of times I was just going, how did they even design this? Like, I don't want to show too many of the new bosses because that's kind of spoilery, but like a lot of these bosses not only have 2 phases, there are a couple bosses that have 3 phases where they'll change like elemental types and attack styles, and even optional side dungeons have completely new styles of enemy and encounter and summons. And like, I love this. Everything about this is completely perfect. I think the only complaint I have is that the camera can at times be quite busted. I think that they tried to create this interesting mix of open areas and closed areas, but in certain spots, I definitely found that the camera, when I'm trying to have like a big, long, drawn-out duel against a creature, I'd get stuck with the camera just tucked into like a tiny piece of the environment, and I would die because of it. This happened 4 or 5 times, which isn't a ton, but I mean, it just feels like too much. I'm not sure if they need to figure out how to make the camera clip better or what the problem is, but when you die to a boss that you've properly trained, memorized, you've got your summons ready, you're kicking its butt, and then the camera gets stuck in a wall, it's like, well, that sucked because I didn't feel like I got beaten by the game. I got beaten by the mechanics. Overall, I loved this. I loved this so much. I mean, even now after having finished it, I want to go back. I want to keep exploring. I mean, now that there's actually the game is released, I can look at like tutorials and videos and guides. I want to look at Fextra Life and maps and see what the heck I missed, because there are certainly areas that to me still make utterly no sense, and I mean that in the best compliment possible. But how do you guys feel about Shadow of the Erdtree? Tell me your thoughts in the comments down below, and if you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, subscribe if you haven't already, and please keep dreaming. There are so many references to Berserk in this. I don't know if you're a Berserk fan. Obviously, I'm a Berserk super fan. I've got a Berserk tattoo and stuff, but man, was I blown away by the fact that this feels very Berserk, in my opinion. Thanks so much for watching that video. If you want to see something else, you can always click this link to see what I put up last, or, you know, subscribe and see what's coming up next. Also, I promise that whatever I do, it'll try not to suck.